Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share, and restack buttons. Guys, this is a special alert. I don't usually do videos on Tuesdays, but this one we have to do. Are we on the verge of nuclear war based on what's happening right now in the Russia-Ukraine conflict and changes in policy by NATO member nations such as the United States, France, and the UK? The short answer, I believe the most likely scenario is no, and we'll go through why that is. However, that does not mean that the chances of nuclear war are zero. In fact, there's a very high probability still that we will see nuclear conflict, and that probability is higher today than it was a week ago, and it's higher today than it was 24 hours ago. So now, keep in mind, when I'm talking about nuclear war, I do not believe there will be a global, all-out nuclear war that destroys the human race. The Bible teaches that human beings still inhabit the planet right up until the moment Jesus returns at the end of the 7-year tribulation. We're not even in the tribulation yet, so certainly this will not, what's happening right now will not lead to the end of humanity. So let's clear that up right away. That would be contrary to what the Bible teaches. However, I still believe we could see nuclear weapons used in the immediate future. There's a high probability. So we're going to talk about what's happening right now, what the most likely outcomes of this conflict are. We're going to talk about maybe why is this happening? And we've actually talked about this before and predicted this. So we're going to go back and revisit that. And then we're going to talk about what you should be doing as a result and how you should be feeling in the midst of this. And let me assure you, you shouldn't be filled with fear or afraid. So we're going to talk about why. But let's dive right in and take a look at this right here. So this is from the U.S. Sun. It says Vlad goes nuclear. And of course, this is going to be in times of war, you have propaganda pieces, and you're going to see some of that in this article as we read it. I'm just going to laugh at it. That's what we have to do in the face of these things that are happening in the world. But it says, Vlad goes nuclear. Putin allows nuclear response to long-range U.S. missiles being fired at Russia as he signs off on drastic World War III escalation. It says Britain and France's own long-range rockets could soon come into play. So this says Vladimir Putin has given the green light to a fresh nuke doctrine, threatening to use nuclear weapons against the West if Ukraine fires long-range missiles on Russian soil. The deluded tyrant, and of course this is where I say, you know, a real news report would just say the tyrant or Putin, right? Not the deluded tyrant. When they start weighting things down with descriptors, these adjectives that they're dropping all over the place, that's when you know they're slanting it a certain way. Fine, I'm no fan of Putin, but this gives us a glimpse into what's happening as well as maybe what some of the people on the ground are thinking about, maybe why this is happening. So this says, the deluded tyrant was left raging when U.S. President Joe Biden finally approved use of the far-reaching rockets by Ukraine after 1,000 days of war. It has some pictures. It says, Putin's snarling propaganda mouthpiece. So there we go again with really heavy use of adjectives for a news piece. But it says, Dmitry Peskov swore on Tuesday that the use of Western non-nuclear missiles by Ukraine's armies could spark a nuclear response. Russia has issued countless similar threats in the past, invoking fears of possible nuclear escalation in the West. But now the stakes have been kicked up a notch, with the Kremlin officially putting a nuclear retaliation on the table in an updated doctrine. Reports later surfaced that Ukraine had fired at least 6 ATACMS missiles inside Russia, striking an ammo depot in Bryansk. Russia was forced to admit to the crushing defeat, claiming to have shot down 5 of the rockets. The U.S. on Sunday approved a decision that allows Ukraine to fire some American ATACMS rockets inside Russia. It followed one of the largest air attacks of the Ukraine war so far, with 120 missiles and 90 drones fired by Russia. North Korea also recently sent over 10,000 soldiers to allied Russia to help Putin take back land in Kursk, infiltrated by Ukraine in August. So we've seen North Korea enter into this war on Russia's side. Let's hope this isn't a replay of World War I, where we see this regional conflict just bring in every nation in the world into this vortex. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but it remains to be seen. It says it puts into play Britain's Storm Shadow and France's Scalp missiles. And you'll have to forgive my voice is just giving out. It's that time of year with something in the air. It says ramping up pressure for Ukraine's other Western allies to follow the U.S. lead. Russia is claiming the move has crossed a red line, marking a sign of war from the West as they move to support embattled Ukraine. Peskov said the new policy, quote, concerns the fact that the Russian Federation reserves the right to use nuclear weapons in the event of aggression with the use of conventional weapons against it. When asked if the new policy means Russia views long-range missile firing as an attack by a non-nuclear state, Ukraine, with the support of a nuclear state, the United States, and provokes the possibility of Russia using nuclear weapons in response, Peskov said, yes, that is what is being discussed. So the United States has supplied these missiles to Ukraine, but it requires U.S. support in order to properly target and fire these missiles. They're not just handing them over and you push a button. It requires U.S. intelligence. It requires U.S. training and technical assistance in order to launch these properly. So Russia is saying we consider this an attack by the United States when these are fired. So it says, Andrei Gurylev, reservist Russian army general, MP, and pro-Putin TV propagandist, warned of a full-scale nuclear strike on Britain. There are individual targets that can be hit with demonstrative warning strikes. He said the first candidate to get a nuclear bludgeon is the UK. He also declared if anyone has the urge to launch ATACMS, Scalp, Storm Shadow missiles, and we just mentioned ATACMS have already been used, there will be essentially nothing left of America trying to pull us into escalation. It says as the world marks it should be 1,000, not 100, but 1,000 days of war in Ukraine on Tuesday, Putin's puppet, Vasily Nebenzia, told the Security Council the use of Western missiles in Russia amounted to suicidal strikes. He urged a rethink from Britain and France. Perhaps Joe Biden himself, for many reasons, has nothing to lose, he said, but the short-sightedness of the British and French leadership, which are rushing to play along with the outgoing administration and dragging not only their countries but the whole of Europe into a full-scale escalation with extremely serious consequences, is striking. This is exactly what our former Western partners should think about before it is too late. Another senior propagandist, Putin's TV mouthpiece Dmitry Keslyov, said U.S., British, and French military officers would do the actual targeting of the missiles which brought them into the war. Exactly. He asked, how will Russia respond? The answer could be anything. Anything. It's not for nothing that our nuclear doctrine has been adjusted. As President Putin has repeatedly emphasized, missile strikes deep into Russian territory will change the nature of the conflict. Its very essence will become a radical escalation. After all, the United States, Britain, and France will be directly at war with Russia, with all the consequences that entails. So we're seeing big talk about what this means. He goes on, he says, for their own territories and those who inhabit these territories, as for the inhabitants of Ukraine who live in the neighborhood of airfields where F-16s are based, they better move far away from them. And then they add this inset here to the piece, which I think gives us a little bit of insight into at least the thinking of some of the people who are behind these decisions. So it says how Ukraine could turn war around in weeks using U.S. missiles. It says today marks 1,000 days of Vlad's grueling war in Ukraine that has left more than 1 million soldiers and civilians dead or wounded. Putin's forces invaded their neighboring nation in February 2022 as part of the deluded tyrant's plan to rebuild the Soviet Union amid his paranoid fears over NATO. Again, I'm not sure why the need for all of these adjectives, especially when they're calling the other side propagandists. Just report the news. Almost 3 years later, Kiev's battle-weary troops are fighting to the death on multiple fronts. They have faced several setbacks in the grinding conflict as Russia has made slow but incremental gains over Ukrainian territory. But the green light from the U.S. that now allows Ukraine to use long-range ATACMS missiles could be a game changer, an expert has said. Colonel Hamash de Breton Gordon told The Sun how Ukraine could turn the war around in 6 weeks when provided with unwavering support from key allies in the West. Again, unwavering support means NATO's all in. It's hard to imagine how that does not lead to an escalating nuclear war. But this goes on. It says the former British Army officer said Washington's decision to allow Ukraine to use ATACMS and the prospect of Britain's Storm Shadow missiles joining the war effort is a significant development. He explained, since day one, Putin and his close aides have been threatening a nuclear strike if we escalate it. And today is the 1,000th day of this conflict, and it hasn't happened. Now, I would point out that just because something hasn't happened does not mean it will not happen. But this gives you a glimpse into the mindset of the people who are making these decisions. He goes on, he says, it should embolden our leaders who must now realize that Putin's threats are completely hollow. Are they? He says, with the Russian boxer on the ropes, now is the time that we enable the Ukrainians to absolutely put in the killer punch and be in a really good position for the expected ceasefire. He added, the fact that the Russians have been so vehement in their verbal attacks against the use of NATO missiles shows that this is a significant step. It could allow Ukraine to gain a good position in the next 6 weeks, which will be important for Zelensky if Trump forces a ceasefire after getting back into office. So it's possible, one of the possibilities for why this is happening is the people making these decisions think we can have the surge, Ukraine can move forward, establish better positions than it has today in the time between now and when Trump is inaugurated. And then in the meantime, when Trump calls for a ceasefire, Ukraine would be in a better position for the negotiations of how that ends than they are today. That's the thinking. I would also think that their thinking, and it's not necessarily wrong on this account, would be that Putin would be reluctant to escalate and use nuclear weapons, knowing that could spiral out of control and lead to all-out nuclear war, when he knows that in 2 months, a new administration will be in power that would likely end the conflict very quickly. So that, again, that may be one of the things they're thinking here, but this is playing with fire. So let's take a look at this right here. This is from Zero Hedge. It says Lavrov warns West is escalating conflict just after Putin signs nuclear doctrine expands into effect. Starting in late September, Russia had unveiled its expanded nuclear doctrine, which proposed a lowered threshold for Russian strategic forces' use of nukes. This was due to, quote, the emergence of new sources of military threats and risk for Russia and our allies, amid fiercer drone and missile attacks coming across the border from Ukraine. This change in nuclear doctrine has now been formally signed into effect by Vladimir Putin on Tuesday, 2 days after Biden authorized Ukraine to begin conducting long-range strikes inside Russia with US-made missiles. Ukraine has already taken advantage of that approval also on Tuesday using an MGM-140 Army Tactical Missile System, or ATACMS, to strike a military installation in the western Bryansk region. For the first time, Ukraine's defense forces struck Russian territory with ATACMS ballistic missiles, RBC Ukraine News reported Tuesday. RBC Ukraine said the military facility near the city of Karachev in the Bryansk region was successfully hit with ATACMS after 6 American-made missiles were fired, with Russia saying it intercepted 5 of them. And that should make people think, their ears perk up a little bit as well, because here we've seen all of this advanced weaponry supplied by the United States. Most of it's been destroyed. So these are supposed to be these sophisticated missiles that are so great, but 5 of the 6 were destroyed. Who knows if that's true or not? But that should that should not make people in the United States feel very good anyway. It says this location was about 71 miles from the border with Ukraine. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has described that the nuclear doctrine changes mean that, quote, the Russian Federation reserves the right to use nuclear weapons in the event of aggression, using conventional weapons against it and or the Republic of Belarus. An important element of this document is that nuclear deterrence is aimed at ensuring that a potential adversary understands the inevitability of retaliation in the event of aggression against the Russian Federation or its allies. Thus, this is the key change in lowering of the threshold that even conventional weapons used by an enemy could trigger nuclear retaliation if deemed enough of a threat against Russia and its sovereignty. The Associated Press also spells out the new doctrine allows for a potential nuclear response by Moscow, even to a conventional attack on Russia by any nation that is supported by a nuclear power. Alarmingly, Peskov has already said that a Ukrainian attack like today's, the one that's already happened, could potentially trigger it. Asked Tuesday if a Ukrainian attack with longer-range U.S. missiles could potentially trigger a nuclear response, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov answered affirmatively, pointing to the doctrine's provision that holds the door open for it after a conventional strike that raises critical threats to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Russia and its ally, Belarus. Also, according to the newly expanded doctrine, in the event Western powers assist another nation in a major attack on Russian soil, those same Western powers will also be held responsible. This can trigger Russian nuclear launch. This appears to be why Peskov answered in the affirmative. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has addressed the nuclear doctrine change from Brazil's Rio de Janeiro on the sidelines of the G20 summit. He asserted that Russia's position is that nuclear war won't happen, and that fundamentally Russian nuclear doctrine doesn't differ from the United States, which sees nuclear weapons as a deterrent. But still, he added, Russia will react accordingly to Ukraine firing a U.S. long-range missile. He expressed hope the West will study the update in Russia's nuclear doctrine, a hope that they in the West will read this doctrine, and not the way they read the UN Charter, seeing only what they need, but the doctrine in its entirety and interconnectedness, Lavrov said. The West appears to be working toward escalating the Ukraine conflict. Meanwhile, the U.S. has indicated it won't respond to Russia's nuclear doctrine move. Let's hope saner heads prevail at the White House. This is Zero Hedge speaking, at least until Trump enters the Oval Office, after which serious efforts toward peace talks might begin and have a much greater chance. Meanwhile, Medvedev also weighs in and characteristically doesn't hold back. So this is one of the top advisors to Vladimir Putin, Dmitry Medvedev. He says Russia's new nuclear doctrine means NATO missiles fired against our country could be deemed an attack by the bloc on Russia. Russia could retaliate with weapons of mass destruction against Kiev and key NATO facilities wherever they're located. That means World War III. So this is the type of talk coming from these high-ranking officials that none of us would like to see. But it seems as though we are on the cusp of nuclear war, as we see in this BBC report. Nordic neighbors release new advice on surviving war. And we have Norway, Denmark, and Finland all telling their citizens, distributing pamphlets. Sweden is distributing a pamphlet on how to survive nuclear war that they've only distributed their citizens 5 times since World War II. This is happening right now. So are we beginning to see, are we in the moments before a nuclear conflict? That remains to be seen, but we also see this. This is from this morning, breaking. It says another submarine telecom cable has been cut in the Baltic Sea. This time it's a cable between Sweden and Lithuania. Yesterday, the news broke that a cable between Finland and Germany had been cut. So again, this is very concerning. These are the types of damaging critical infrastructure that could be an escalation of a conflict or something that you see in preparation to an offensive attack. We also see this from BBC. It says Germany suspects sabotage behind severed undersea cables. It says German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius has said damage to 2 undersea cables in the Baltic Sea looks like an act of sabotage and a hybrid action without knowing who is to blame. And we'll talk about that in just a second. A 730-mile telecom cable between Finland and Germany was severed in the early hours of Monday, while a 218-kilometer internet link between Lithuania and Sweden's Gotland Island stopped working on Sunday. The incidents came at a time of heightened tension, with Russia and Pistorius said nobody believes that these cables were cut accidentally. I would agree with that. The Swedish and Lithuanian defense ministers said they were deeply concerned that the cable connecting their 2 countries had been cut. Situations like these must be assessed with the growing threat posed by Russia and our neighborhood as a backdrop. Ministers Powell Johnson and Laurinaitis Kashunas said in a statement, not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, with a call for sanctions to be used in response to acts of sabotage. So, what does that mean? Well, they say Russia is the one behind this, then I don't know what good sanctions are going to do, because supposedly they've sanctioned Russia in every way they could sanction them. There's reports floating out there that China is responsible for this. Remains to be seen, but if that's the case, then sanctions against China would have huge repercussions in and of themselves. It would also point to China entering the war on Russia's behalf, as North Korea already has done. And then, maybe it's the same people who destroyed the Nord Stream pipeline, in which case, not sure how you would sanction yourself. Let's put it that way, but maybe we'll see them sanction themselves. So, all this remains to be seen, guys. This is very serious. This is playing with fire. I think there's something behind this that isn't going to be in the mainstream corporate media. We'll talk about that in a moment. But nevertheless, that doesn't erase the fact or cover up the fact that this is very serious, and we could very well see nuclear conflict as a result of this. Again, from the beginning, I've said, I don't think we're looking at global nuclear catastrophe for the reasons that I stated earlier, but we very well could see tactical nuclear weapons used within the region, and this conflict could escalate. It could have major impact on, obviously, anyone who is near those areas where those are used. Then it would have major implications on global supply chains and financial markets. It would be a really big deal, even though, and I hesitate to say this, it would be only a limited nuclear strike. We don't want to see any nuclear weapons used. But guys, I want to turn your attention to this right here. So this is from the Substack. This is a video that I put out back on September 19th, so 59 days ago. This was for premium subscribers, people who have signed up for paid subscriptions on that site. I put these together basically as a thank you to them. But I've turned off the premium on this. This is free. I'm going to put a link to it in the comments. The title of this was, "Are We on the Verge of a Catastrophic War?" And you can see what maybe the purpose of that would be. And it said, "Is the world teetering on the brink of a catastrophic war?" Unfortunately, the answer is most likely yes. But why? What is the strategic purpose of the currently rumored wars? Could it be the primary aim of such a war isn't geopolitical power or advantage, but simply cover for something else? Once again, the answer is an unfortunate and likely yes. Today's video, we talk about why the probability of a major war breaking out is particularly high at this moment, what the true purpose of that war would be, and how it directly relates to Bible prophecy. This is the video YouTube won't let me show you, and it could change how you view unfolding world events. Guys, this is an important video. I've taken the paywall off. You can go watch this for free. I'll pin the link at the top of the comments so you can go and watch this. I encourage you to watch this because in this video, again, from 59 days ago, we were talking about this exact scenario where these ATACMS missiles were sent to Ukraine at that time. And there was talk of, would this escalate? And at the time, they said, well, we're not going to, we're giving them the missiles, but they don't have permission to use them. So don't worry about it. Right? Don't worry about it. We haven't given them permission to use them. And in the video, I said, well, why would you do that? Well, the only reason you would do that is if you didn't want them to use them right now. Right? We want them to have them, and we will give them permission to use them, which we just saw. at a time and a place of our choosing, our being the United States, the UK, France, NATO, and a time of our choosing for a specific reason, which we go over in this video. Again, can't give that specific reason here. I don't think this video would last very long if I did. But I encourage you to follow the link at the top of the comments and watch this, guys, because again, in that video I said they're saying they're not going to use it. They probably aren't going to use them this week, this month, but they're reserving that for a time of their choosing, and something specifically would be happening at that time. And I believe there's a super high probability that that's what they're trying to do, guys. They're trying to, when a magician wants to take your attention away from what they're holding in their left hand, they hold their right hand up like this, right? And unfortunately, in this case, the right hand is nuclear war. Look over here, there's nuclear war, to the point where they would actually trigger the use of nuclear weapons. That's the distraction. Hey, nuclear weapons over here. And then you don't notice what's going on over there. There's I believe, a very, very high probability we're on the brink of seeing that. So, pulled up this map as well. This is a map of underwater cables. If we hone into this, we can see the two cables in question, the Sea Lion and this BCS East-West Interlink. Those are the two cables that were severed in the last 48 hours. Remains to be seen what is the reason behind that. We'll reserve judgment for as more news comes out. But I would point out that if what was stated in this video is true, then I would expect very soon we will hear one of these cables. Maybe multiple of those cables are cut. And if we hear in the news that these transatlantic cables have been severed, then to me that's confirmation of exactly what we discussed in that video. And we know it's not time to look over here. We need to be, and we will shine light on that. So if this is speculative right now, but I will do another video. As soon as we hear about that, I'll make a video as soon as I can. We'll explain why that is. But guys, in the meantime, what should you be doing? You should be praying. Guys, you don't need to be fearful. You don't need to be afraid. The Bible teaches us these things right here. So let's read Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 through 7. It says, "Don't worry about anything." Now I'll point out, does it say, only worry about some things? Or don't worry about these things, but these things you should worry about? No, it does not say that. It says, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. So guys, we should be praying for peace. We should pray that this conflict does not result in nuclear war. Tell God that that's what we need and be thankful. We're coming up. Next week will be Thanksgiving in the United States of America, where we give thanks to God for all the blessings He has given us. So take the time to do that now, today. Thank Him for all He has done and pray. Ask Him to keep us away from this nuclear conflict. And guys, if you're focused on Him, then He will give you a peace that exceeds anything you can understand. We had this promise right here from Jesus. He says, I'm leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give. So don't be troubled or afraid, as there is no need to be troubled or afraid over what we see happening in the news. We also had this from John 16:33. Jesus again speaking, he says, I've told you all this so you may have peace in me. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. Guys, if you don't have that peace right now, if you do not know Jesus, I invite you to welcome him into your life. If you've built your life on the shifting sands of anything other than Christ, you have an opportunity to build your life on the solid rock of Jesus Christ. Why would you do that? Well, guys, there's bad news out there. All of these things that are happening. But there's also bad news in that we were all born sinners. That means we've fallen short of God's perfection. He's a holy, perfect God. We've fallen short. We've missed the mark. That's what sin means, just missing the mark. And unfortunately, the Bible says the wages of sin is death, which means that as a result of our sin, our destination after we leave this world is eternal separation from God in hell. It's terrible news, because there is good news. The good news is that while we were still sinners, Jesus Christ, God, became man. He became a flesh and blood man, Jesus Christ. He lived a perfect, sinless life, and he went to the cross and shed his blood as a sacrifice and paid the penalty for our sins. And then he rose in victory over death. And he sits at the right hand of the Father in heaven today, preparing a place for us. And when God looks down upon us, he sees his perfect holy Son, because we have been washed in the blood of Jesus. Guys, if you know him, if you trust in Jesus for forgiveness of your sins, if you put the full weight of all of your trust in him, you will not be disappointed, and you will experience a peace that surpasses all understanding. And all of the things of this world, nuclear war included, are not going to bother you. You're not going to be fearful. You're not going to be afraid, because you know Christ has already won the victory. So I hope if you don't know Jesus already, that you will invite him into your life today. In the meantime, check the comments down below. Make sure to watch that video from September, because rewatching it myself today, I was taken aback by how what we talked about 2 months ago we're seeing play out right here and now today, and what that ultimately means. And so make sure to head over and check that out. In the meantime, leave your comments below. Let me know what you think is going on. Make sure you're praying for the peace of this world, that nuclear weapons are not used. We would hate to see that. Leave your comments below. Make sure to hit the like, share, restack buttons. God willing, I will see you next time. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to visit my Substack at brittgillette.substack.com. There you'll find my latest videos and articles, as well as notes, where I share the latest news headlines, the articles I'm reading, and the videos I'm watching. Subscribe for free, and each new post on Substack will be sent directly to your email. Just scroll to the bottom of the homepage and hit the subscribe button. As an added bonus, your first welcome email will include a link to a copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt Gillette on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.